Hey everybody, this is my 55-gallon T-bar tank, and I recently got in here and I trimmed the plants way back, and I did a lot of rearranging, and I wound up removing a lot of plants. I also did the same thing to my 55-gallon gourami tank we've got next door, so we'll have a look at that one in a minute. But I was asked recently how I trim my plants back, and it's not really a cut and dry answer that I could just give somebody, so I thought I would shoot a little bit of a video about it and we could sort of discuss how I trim my plants back. It largely depends on the plant. I don't have a huge variety of plants. I'll throw that out there right away. The reason my tanks look so lush and green is not because I'm some sort of plant guru. It is simply because I keep really easy to maintain plants that have really low lighting and nutritional needs. I use a really high quality, or at least in my opinion it's high quality, planted substrate, and I really like it. I'll put a link below to it. It's by Carib Sea. It's Eco Complete. It's the black stuff, but it does come in other colors, and you can get it in either like the bimodal like I have it, or you can get it in sand. And it's great for low maintenance plants. I don't know if it would be enough for higher need plants, if you could get away without using any kind of foods or ferts or tabs or anything, but I get away without using any foods or ferts or tabs or anything, and that's largely because I have all of these very easy to maintain, easy to grow plants. I have a lot of Java Fern, I've got a lot of Temple Plant, I've got a lot of water Sprite, and then I got this water lily right here, and I think I got some Val in a few of my tanks. It's all real low maintenance, easy to do stuff. So that being said, in order to trim it, which I do need to do from time to time, it largely depends on the type of plant. This one, for example, my Tiger Lotus, you can see all of these stalks. They look like that because I was trying to redo this tank. I was getting in there with the net. I was trying to catch my red-tailed loach. I was getting frustrated because the net kept getting tangled up in all of the big water lily fronds. So I literally reached in there, grabbed a handful of fronds, and then took my scissors and cut the whole wad off. And that's why it looks like that. That's fine. I normally try to get as close to the ground as I can, maybe an inch above the substrate or an inch above the root ball. You don't want to cut too close to the root ball, but all of those dead stems now are basically dead and decaying plant matter in the tank. I'm not worried about it. It's just going to add to the bioload a little bit, but this tank can handle that bioload. So I'm not concerned about it, but that is something to make note of. Those stalks are now dying vegetation that is decaying and breaking down in the tank. But it doesn't hurt the plant at all. The new growth will generate right out of the root mass, right out of the bottom, and you'll get all of these nice new little shoots and new stems and all that new growth coming out after you cut the old stuff back, and the plant will keep right on ticking. So other plants like my Java Fern here, depends on what you mean by cut it back. If you just want to trim the top of it back, you can literally just go in there with scissors and give it a haircut, and you can trim it and sculpt it to shape and make it look like whatever. I don't do that. I just let it grow and do its thing, but occasionally when it's getting too big and bushy, you will need to get in, and if it's growing, you can see right here, I hope you can make out, it has one main, what looks like a root body, that is actually a rhizome, and then the roots come off of the rhizome. If you were to want to cut this back, if it was running and trailing and going too far, you would simply get in there and cut that rhizome and remove the end, and you'd now have another plant. And you could simply do the same thing with the other rhizome. You don't want to bury it under the ground. You want the rhizome to be above the substrate, whether you've got it growing on a rock like I do here in this tank, or if you actually want it growing right up out of the substrate. You don't want this main rhizome under the soil. These roots growing down into the soil is fine, but you want the rhizome above it. Again, the leaves can just trim them however you want, but if you want to actually stop the main runner from going, you just get in there and you cut that rhizome off. My water Sprite is basically the same thing. You just want to get in there. If you trim any errant fronds that are getting too long, you would just go in, let's see if I can do this with two hands. You would just go in there and find, you know, the base of one of the fronds. You'd get down near the root ball and you just cut it off and then remove that frond and leave the root ball alone, and then new growth will generate right out of the center of the root ball. So very, very easy to do, not complicated stuff at all. The only other ones I have really to talk about would be my Anubias, and that's going to be the same sort of thing as with the Java. You can see here you've got your main rhizome, and then off of that rhizome you will see the roots growing. The white ones are the roots, the big green trunk down the middle is the rhizome. If I was going to remove this end of the plant, see if we can focus here, I would get in there and I would cut the rhizome, you know, somewhere between one shoot and the next, and just get in there and cut it and remove it. You definitely want to use a nice sharp clean pair of scissors. You don't want to get in there and mash it and tear it apart. You don't want to get in there and try to break it. You want to definitely cut it with something nice and sharp. But that's how you would separate it and cut it into two pieces, and that is also how I would remove this top piece. If I simply wanted to trim it back, if one of these leaves, for example, was dying off or had some snail damage, then you would just go in there and without getting too close to the rhizome, you would just snip the leaf off right there at the bottom. Or maybe if, say, these leaves, I didn't want these 3 or 4 leaves sticking out quite so far this way, you would just get in there and trim those individual leaves off, and that's all there is to it. Again, it's the same as the Java Fern, except instead of getting in here and giving it a snip like you would with the Java Fern to just sort of shorten the foliage, these have stems, so you would remove an entire stem at a time, and then that's it. Again, not complicated, not difficult stuff to do. The last plant that I have, well, I guess this valve's easy enough to talk about. Same sort of deal. If you want to get in there and remove any, you can't really snip the leaves in half. You'd have to come all the way down to the bottom near the root mass. And right here's a good example. This dying leaf, I'll just get in there and I'll pluck that leaf out, and that little dead stem will come with it. If that was getting a little too thick and bushy, maybe get in here some of these longer ones that are getting a little out of control, maybe trace them down to the base and snip a couple, 3 individual ones off there to thin it out. I've never actually divided these, so I'm not sure what we've got going on under the soil. I'm assuming it's just a root mass, and you would get in there and sort of gently tear and tease it apart and cut it down the middle, and you'd probably have 2 plants. I don't know that, but that would be my assumption based on what I know about just gardening in general. And then lastly, I've got these temple plants, which grow prolifically, and right now we actually need to get in this tank. You can kind of see this one here is growing right up and out of the water. So these are easy as well. It's a traditional stemmed plant, and you would treat it as such. It just happens to grow underwater. So you'll see all these roots in here. If you wanted this whole top section to be another plant, which I'm going to do, I will just come in here, I'll go below where these roots are growing out of this, and I'll cut this stem off down here carefully, and I'll already have all these roots started. So my next tank, I'll plant this right up to there, and I'll have that much plant already sticking out of the top with all of those roots already on it. And this tank will have this whole section removed, and I'll get new forking growth, and this will get thicker and denser and bushier coming right out of there. So that's how I divide and cut back my temple plant. And that's about all I can really think of. I will come over here. Got no plants in this tank. This tank is all same stuff, all just big masses of Java Fern. I got a few little temple plants in there, but that's mostly Java Fern. See, this temple plant is the same way. You see these long white roots hanging off of this stalk that goes all the way through there. I'll cut this stalk off right there. It'll fork and branch. I'll get a bushier growth right here, and then I'll have this whole entire piece that I could plant somewhere else in another tank. And yes, my gudgeon's injuries are healing up nicely, so I'm happy about that. And let me try not to step on Squeaker the cat, who is sleeping under my feet there. These are chunks of rhizome from Anubias. They were covered in cyanobacteria, so I cut the rhizomes off, and then I cut all of the leaves off, and you can see all of the stumps where the leaves were. It's actually upside down now. I've got the roots facing up and the leaf stalks facing down, but you will notice right here on the end I've got some green growth and a little bit of new shoot going upwards. So that's how you can propagate any of these plants with rhizomes, is you just cut a chunk of that rhizome off. Even if you remove the leaves, there's enough energy stored in the rhizome itself that it should generate new growth and start growing again. I'm just hoping I didn't kill it in the process of having so much stuff on it. I treated it with a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, etc. So we can't necessarily use this as a full example of how that would work. At any rate, that's about all I can tell you, because those are the only plants I've got. I can't really go into a lot of detail about other plants. Again, my planted tanks might be lush and green, but it's only because they have a lot of very, very simple, easy to care for plants. I am by no means any kind of planted tank guru or anything like that. I've never used foods, ferts. I've never injected my tanks with CO2 or anything else. So, you know, if you're looking for those kind of details, you're going to have to look elsewhere. If you want nice and simple, I'm your guy. So thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, this one here is my 125 gallon tank. I'll see you real soon in the next one.